Do you still remember the day the world lost Bruce Lee? July 20th, 1973. A 32-year-old legend, at the peak of his fame and physical prime, suddenly gone. The official story said it was just a tragic allergic reaction to a painkiller. But deep down, many of us never believed it. For 53 years, one woman carried the heaviest burden of that mystery. In a quiet studio at TVB Hong Kong, a 78-year-old woman sits before the camera. She takes a deep breath, her voice trembling, yet filled with quiet determination. She is Betty Ting Pei, the woman the entire world once blamed for killing Bruce Lee. After more than half a century of silence, she finally speaks. "I was Bruce's lover. He died right here on my bed. He received death threats, and his dangerous habits pushed him to the very edge." Tonight, for the first time, she reveals the full, raw truth, the secret romance, the mysterious threats from the triads, Bruce's self-destructive routines, the desperate hours before his death, and the cover-up that followed. This is not just another documentary. This is the final confession. Are you ready to hear what really happened that night? Hit subscribe and dive in. Chapter 1. Betty Ting Pei, the Star of Destiny. Do you know how one single decision can completely change the course of a person's life? For Betty Ting Pei, that moment came when she was still a young girl growing up in Taipei. Betty Ting Pei was born on February 19, 1947, in Taipei, Taiwan. She came from a respected and conservative family with a long tradition in medicine. For 3 generations, her family had produced doctors. Her father was a well-known physician, and from the day she was born, everyone expected her to follow the same safe and honorable path. Medicine was the future they had already chosen for her. But Betty was different. Even as a little girl, she was drawn to beauty, lights, and the world of performance. While other children played quietly, Betty dreamed of standing under bright spotlights. She loved the glamour of movies and the excitement of the stage. Her family, however, strongly disapproved. In their eyes, the entertainment industry was unstable, risky, and far beneath their social status. As Betty grew older, the tension at home increased. Her father repeatedly reminded her that a proper young lady should become a doctor, not chase foolish dreams of fame. Yet the more they tried to guide her, the stronger her desire to break free became. Then, in the late 1960s, when she was in her early 20s, Betty made a bold and life-changing decision. She left her comfortable home in Taipei and moved to Hong Kong, the glittering capital of Chinese cinema at that time. It was a risky move. She had very little money and almost no connections, but she carried with her an unshakable determination. At first, life in Hong Kong was not easy. She started with small modeling jobs and minor acting roles, but her striking beauty and natural charisma quickly caught attention. Soon, she signed her first contract with the legendary Shaw Brothers studio. Later, she moved to Golden Harvest, the rising powerhouse that would soon become home to Bruce Lee himself. By the early 1970s, Betty Ting Pei had become a recognizable face in Hong Kong's film industry. She appeared in more than 50 films, playing a wide range of characters. However, she was most often cast as the classic femme fatale, the beautiful, mysterious, and dangerously seductive woman who could bring both passion and trouble. Audiences loved her elegance and allure, but that image would later become both her greatest strength and her heaviest burden. Now let's go back to the year 1969. Imagine a young Betty standing alone in a small dressing room at a film studio in Hong Kong. The room is dimly lit, with mirrors covering the walls and costumes hanging everywhere. She stands in front of the mirror, still wearing the elegant cheongsam from her latest scene. She looks at her own reflection, touches her face gently, and whispers to herself with quiet fire in her eyes, "I will not be just another pretty face. One day I will become a legend." At that moment, she had no idea how true those words would become, though not in the way she hoped, because destiny had already written a different, much darker role for her. In just a few short years, this ambitious young actress from Taiwan would find herself at the center of one of the biggest mysteries in entertainment history. Her name would forever be linked to the sudden death of the greatest martial arts star the world had ever known. She would go from being a rising star to being whispered about in tabloids. From a girl chasing dreams to a woman carrying secrets too heavy for anyone her age. And the role destiny gave her was the most tragic one of all. She would become the last lover of Bruce Lee and the woman who was with him on the final night of his life. Yet back in 1969, standing in front of that mirror, Betty Ting Pei still believed her future would be filled with lights, applause, and glory. She could never have imagined the storm that was quietly approaching, a storm that would arrive on a hot summer evening in July 1973. And so her story continued. From the strict medical family in Taipei to the bustling film sets of Hong Kong, Betty had already broken free from the path her parents had chosen. She had stepped into a world of fame and fantasy. But what she didn't know was that this new world would also bring her face to face with love, danger, and one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. Little did she know that her biggest role was yet to come, and it would not be on the silver screen, but in real life. Chapter 2: The Secret Romance, a Forbidden Love. But every great story has its turning point, and for Betty Ting Pei, that turning point arrived quietly in the early 1970s. At that time, Hong Kong's film industry was exploding with energy. Golden Harvest was quickly becoming one of the most powerful studios in Asia, and its biggest star was none other than Bruce Lee. After the massive success of The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, Bruce had become a global phenomenon. He was no longer just a martial artist. He was a cultural icon who was breaking barriers in Hollywood and changing the way the world saw Asian men on screen. Bruce's personal life, however, was far more complicated than his public image suggested. He was a married man with two young children, Brandon and Shannon, living with his wife Linda in Kowloon. The pressure on him was immense. He was constantly traveling, training like a machine, and carrying the weight of being the little dragon for millions of fans who expected him to be invincible every single day. It was during this whirlwind period, sometime between late 1970 and early 1971, that Bruce Lee first met Betty Ting Pei. The introduction happened through Raymond Chow, Bruce's close friend and the powerful head of Golden Harvest. One evening during a casual dinner at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Hong Kong, Raymond brought Betty along. She was already one of the studio's promising young actresses. At that dinner, Bruce sat across from her. Their eyes met for the first time. What started as a simple professional greeting quickly turned into something neither of them could ignore. Bruce was instantly captivated by Betty's beauty, grace, and quiet confidence. Unlike many others who were intimidated by his fame, Betty spoke to him naturally with warmth and intelligence. From that night onward, Bruce began to seek her out more and more. At first, he used work as an excuse, discussing her potential role in his upcoming film Game of Death. But soon the excuses became unnecessary. In her honest 2025 interview with TVB's Control plus F the Truth, Betty finally confirmed what the world had long suspected. Looking straight into the camera with calm but emotional eyes, she said, "Bruce was the one who pursued me. He actively chased after me. We were real lovers. Our relationship was deep, intimate, and full of real emotions." Their secret romance blossomed quickly. They would meet in Betty's apartment in Kowloon Tong, a quiet residential area away from the chaotic film sets and prying eyes of the press. The apartment was modest but cozy. Simple wooden furniture, soft lighting, and large windows that overlooked the glittering lights of Hong Kong at night. It became their hidden sanctuary. As the months passed into 1972, Bruce visited Betty more frequently. Sometimes he would come straight from long hours on the set of Enter the Dragon. He would arrive tired, shoulders tense, eyes heavy with exhaustion. But the moment he stepped inside and closed the door behind him, something in him would soften. Betty became his safe place. the only person with whom he didn't have to perform. With her, he could drop the invincible warrior mask that the world forced him to wear. He no longer had to be the perfect husband, the perfect father, or the unbeatable legend. He could simply be Bruce. One particular night stands out in Betty's memories. It was late, well past midnight. The city outside had grown quiet. Only the distant hum of traffic and the soft glow of neon signs filtered through the curtains. Bruce and Betty were sitting on the couch. He suddenly pulled her close, wrapping his strong arms around her. His voice was low, almost broken, as he whispered into her ear, "Betty, you are the only place where I can cry. The whole world thinks I am the flying dragon. They expect me to be strong, fearless, and perfect every single moment. But here with you, I am just a tired man, a man full of doubts and secrets." In that moment, Betty felt both deep love and heavy sorrow. She could sense the enormous pressure crushing him, the endless training, the strict diet, the constant fear of failure, and the invisible threats that seemed to follow him wherever he went. She held him tighter, stroking his back gently, wishing she could take away some of his burden. Their relationship was passionate and tender, but it was also dangerous. Bruce was still a married man. Betty knew the risks, yet she couldn't pull herself away. There was something about Bruce, his intensity, his vulnerability, and a raw charisma that made her feel truly alive. As 1973 began, their secret meetings became even more frequent. Bruce was pushing his body to the absolute limit. While filming Enter the Dragon, he was losing weight rapidly, suffering from severe headaches, and relying more and more on painkillers. Yet whenever he felt overwhelmed, he would find his way back to Betty's apartment. She became not just his lover, but his emotional anchor in a world that demanded he never show weakness. However, behind the stolen moments of happiness, dark clouds were already gathering. Bruce had begun receiving mysterious threat letters. The Hong Kong triads were tightening their grip on the film industry, and Bruce's growing independence and refusal to bow to their demands had made him a target. But for now, in the warm glow of Betty's apartment, the outside world felt far away. Two souls, one a global superstar carrying the weight of legends, the other a beautiful actress chasing her own dreams, had found each other in the most forbidden way possible. Little did they know that their secret love story was racing toward a heartbreaking end. Chapter 3, The Mysterious Man, Death Threats and Deadly Habit. But while their secret love offered Bruce a moment of peace, the outside world was closing in faster than anyone could imagine. By 1973, Bruce Lee stood at the absolute peak of his career. Enter the Dragon was in full production, the film that would later make him a global superstar. At the same time, he was already planning his next ambitious project, Game of Death. To the world, he was invincible, the little dragon who could defeat anyone. Yet behind the legendary image was a man full of secrets, fears, and dangerous contradictions. Bruce Lee had become a deeply mysterious man. One night in early 1973, inside Betty's apartment in Kowloon Tong, that darkness began to show itself more clearly. The lights were dim. Outside, the humid Hong Kong night hummed with distant traffic. Bruce sat by the window, staring at the flickering city lights. In his hands was a plain white envelope, no stamp, no return address. He slowly unfolded the letter and read it again. Then, without saying a word, he handed it to Betty. The message was short, cold, and direct. It demanded protection money for the film sets. If Bruce refused to cooperate with the triads, the powerful organized crime groups controlling much of Hong Kong's film industry, there would be consequences. The final line was chilling. "Refuse us, and we will make you disappear." Betty's hands trembled as she read it. She looked up at Bruce, fear filling her eyes. "Bruce, this is serious. You have to report this. These people are dangerous." Bruce leaned back, a bitter smile on his face. His eyes looked tired and empty. "I've already received several of these," he said quietly. "The triads want control. They want a cut from every big film, but I won't pay them. I'm not here to bow down. I'm here to make my own movies. my own way." He paused, then added with a dark laugh, "They say they will make me vanish. Let them try." That night, Betty saw a side of Bruce she had never fully understood. A man who lived every day with invisible threats hanging over his head. The triads were not bluffing. Many stars and producers paid quietly to stay safe. But Bruce, with his fierce independence and rising international fame, had openly challenged them. Yet the triads were not the only danger. Bruce's own body was slowly turning against him because of his extreme and self-destructive habits. He trained like a man possessed, sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day. To keep his famous lean physique, he ate only one meal a day. He constantly experimented with supplements, took diuretics to shed water weight, and relied heavily on painkillers to push through exhaustion. The painkiller he used most often was allergic, and by 1973, he was taking it almost every single day. He slept very little and worked without stopping. In May 1973, his body gave a terrifying warning. While filming Enter the Dragon, Bruce suddenly collapsed. He suffered seizures and was rushed to the hospital with cerebral edema, dangerous swelling of the brain. Doctors warned him to slow down immediately, but Bruce ignored them. He returned to work even harder, determined to prove himself to Hollywood. One late evening, not long before July 20th, Bruce came to Betty's apartment looking worse than usual. His face was pale, his cheeks sunken. He sat heavily on the couch and rubbed his temples. Betty sat beside him, worried. Suddenly, he pulled another white envelope from his jacket and threw it onto the table. "Another one," he said, his voice low and rough. "They're getting bolder." Betty picked it up with shaking hands. The message this time was even more direct. "Pay or disappear, we are watching." Tears formed in her eyes. She looked at Bruce and whispered, "Bruce, please, stop this. The training, the pills, the lack of sleep, and now these threats. You're killing yourself. I'm scared for you." Bruce stared out the window into the dark night for a long moment. Then he turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of defiance and deep exhaustion. In her 2025 TVB interview, Betty recalled that moment with pain in her voice. He always lived in fear, not just fear of failure, but fear of the invisible people who were watching him. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. His body felt warm, almost feverish. As he held her tightly, Betty could feel his heart beating too fast. She buried her face in his chest, fighting back tears, knowing she was watching the man she loved slowly destroy himself. One extreme habit, one threat, and one sleepless night at a time. In that quiet apartment, with the city lights glowing coldly outside, two lovers sat together. One carried the crushing weight of fame, death threats from the triads, and self-destructive routines. The other could only watch helplessly as the storm grew closer. The clock was ticking. July 20th, 1973 was approaching fast, and neither of them knew it would be their last night together. Chapter 4, The Fateful Night, July 20th, 1973, minute by minute. It was a hot and humid Thursday afternoon in Hong Kong. The date was July 20th, 1973. Bruce Lee had spent the entire day on the film set of Enter the Dragon, pushing his exhausted body through fight choreography and intense scenes. Earlier that day, he had received yet another threatening letter from the triads. The pressure was mounting from every direction. Hollywood expectations, studio demands, secret enemies, and his own relentless self-discipline. Around 5 p.m., Bruce decided he needed to escape for a while. He drove to Betty Ting Pei's apartment in Kowloon Tong. When Betty opened the door, she saw the exhaustion written all over his face. His eyes were tired, his shoulders slightly slumped. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and gave her a weak smile. "I just need to breathe for a little while," he said softly. "Everything is too loud out there." Betty nodded and let him in. The apartment was quiet and familiar, their private sanctuary away from the chaos of fame. The curtains were half drawn, and soft evening light filtered through the windows. Bruce kicked off his shoes and sat down on the couch for a few minutes, then moved to the bedroom to rest. For a short time, the world outside seemed far away. But around 7 p.m., everything changed. Bruce suddenly clutched his head with both hands. His face twisted in pain. "My head, it hurts so much," he groaned. The headache was violent and sudden, much worse than usual. Betty, who had seen him suffer from headaches many times before, quickly went to get medicine. She brought him a glass of water and one Equagesic tablet, the same painkiller he had taken many times in the past without issue. Bruce swallowed the pill without hesitation. "I'll just lie down for a bit," he told her. "Wake me up in an hour. I have dinner plans with Raymond Chow and some foreign guests tonight." He lay down on Betty's bed, still fully dressed. Betty gently covered him with a light sheet and sat beside him for a while, watching his breathing. At first, he seemed to relax. His body grew still. She thought he had finally fallen into a much-needed sleep. Time passed. At 9 p.m., the phone rang. It was Raymond Chow. His voice sounded impatient on the other end. "Betty, where is Bruce? We've been waiting at the restaurant for almost an hour. Is everything okay?" Betty glanced toward the bedroom. "He's resting. He had a bad headache earlier. Let me wake him up." She hung up and walked into the bedroom. Bruce, wake up. Raymond is waiting." She gently shook his shoulder. No response. She shook him harder. Still nothing. His body felt unusually heavy and limp. Panic began to rise in her chest. "Bruce," she called louder, slapping his face lightly. His head rolled to the side, but his eyes remained closed. His breathing had become slow and shallow. By 9:45 p.m., Betty was terrified. She called Raymond Chow again, her voice trembling. "Something's wrong. He won't wake up. Please come quickly." Raymond Chow rushed to the apartment. When he arrived, the scene inside the bedroom was shocking. Bruce Lee, the man known for his superhuman strength and lightning-fast reflexes, was lying completely motionless on the bed. Chow tried everything, calling his name, shaking him vigorously, even slapping his cheeks. Nothing worked. Both Betty and Chow were now in full panic. They kept hoping he would suddenly open his eyes and laugh it off. But the minutes dragged on and Bruce remained unresponsive. At 10 p.m., they finally made the decision to call Betty's personal doctor. The doctor arrived within 20 minutes. He examined Bruce carefully, checked his pulse, listened to his breathing, and shone a light into his eyes. His face turned serious. "There's no heartbeat I can detect properly, and his breathing is extremely weak," the doctor said. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately." An ambulance was finally called. By the time the paramedics arrived and carried Bruce out of the apartment on a stretcher, more than 5 to 6 hours had already passed since he first complained of the headache and took the Equagesic pill. Bruce Lee was rushed to Queen Elizabeth Hospital in the middle of the night. The doctors worked desperately on him, but it was too late. At around 10:30 p.m., the martial arts legend was officially pronounced dead. The cause of death was listed as cerebral edema, severe swelling of the brain, officially ruled as death by misadventure. In her emotional 2025 TVB interview, Betty Ting Pei broke down in tears as she recalled those final moments. "He looked at me earlier that evening like he wanted to tell me something important. Something heavy was on his mind. His eyes were full of fear and unspoken words. But every time he opened his mouth, he stopped, shook his head, and stayed silent. I regret it so much. I wish I had pushed him to speak. I wish I had forced him to tell me what was troubling him. Maybe if I had, things would have been different." That night, the apartment that had once been their secret haven of love and comfort became the scene of unimaginable tragedy. The woman who loved him could only watch helplessly as the man she called her safe place slipped away right in front of her. The world would wake up the next morning to the shocking news that Bruce Lee was gone at the age of 32. But for Betty Ting Pei, the nightmare was only just beginning. Chapter 5, The Storm After Death and the Final Confession. As we know, the nightmare did not end when Bruce Lee stopped breathing. It was only the beginning of a storm that would destroy Betty Ting Pei's life for the next 5 decades. The very next morning, July 21st, 1973, the Hong Kong newspapers exploded with the shocking headline, "Bruce Lee is dead." Within hours, the news spread around the world like wildfire. But when the public learned that the legendary martial artist had died in Betty Ting Pei's apartment, everything changed. Overnight, Betty went from being a promising young actress to the most hated woman in Hong Kong, and perhaps the entire Chinese-speaking world. The tabloids were merciless. They called her the seductress who killed Bruce Lee, the femme fatale of death, and the woman who poisoned the dragon. Front-page stories accused her of giving Bruce dangerous drugs, of having a secret affair that led to his death, and even of being involved with the triads. One newspaper boldly printed, "Did Betty Ting Pei murder Bruce Lee with a single pill?" Reporters camped outside her apartment day and night. Photographers chased her through the streets, flashing cameras in her face while she tried to hide behind sunglasses and scarves. Complete strangers shouted insults at her in public. Some fans of Bruce Lee sent her death threats, hundreds of letters filled with hatred, cursing her and wishing her the same painful death. "Die, you murderer! You killed our hero! You don't deserve to live after what you did to Bruce." Betty became a prisoner in her own home. She stopped going out. She stopped working. Film producers who once begged her to star in their movies now refused to even mention her name. Her career, which had been rising steadily, collapsed almost overnight. Even worse, some rumors claimed she was connected to the triads, the same criminal organizations that had sent death threats to Bruce. People whispered that she had been used as bait to trap him. The pressure was so overwhelming that Betty began to fear for her own life. She received so many death threats that she eventually had to move houses secretly. In those dark months after Bruce's death, Betty lost everything: her reputation, her career, her peace of mind, and nearly her sanity. She was only 26 years old. Yet through all the accusations, the hatred, and the public trial by media, Betty chose to remain silent. For 53 long years, she refused to speak publicly about what really happened that night. When journalists asked about her relationship with Bruce, she would give vague answers or simply say, "I don't want to speak ill of the dead." Many people took her silence as an admission of guilt, but the truth was far more painful. She stayed quiet to protect Bruce Lee's legacy. She knew the world worshipped him as the perfect hero, a devoted family man, a symbol of strength and discipline. Revealing that he had been having a secret affair, that he was struggling with extreme habits and living in constant fear, would tarnish the image millions loved. She also wanted to protect his wife Linda and their two young children from further pain. So Betty carried the heavy burden alone. She lived with the guilt, the regret, the nightmares, and the constant question that haunted her every night. What was he trying to tell me that evening? Why didn't I push him to speak? Then, in 2025, at the age of 78, Betty Ting Pei finally decided she could no longer stay silent. In a rare and deeply emotional interview on TVB's program, Control Plus F the Truth, the elderly Betty sat under soft studio lights, her hair now completely white, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. For the first time in over half a century, she opened her heart completely. She confirmed what many had suspected, but never heard directly from her. Yes, Bruce and I were lovers. Our relationship was real, deep, and emotional. He pursued me, and I fell in love with him. She recounted the events of that fateful night in painful detail. The severe headache, the Equagesic pill, the long agonizing hours when he wouldn't wake up, and the panic that followed. Her voice cracked as she remembered the look in Bruce's eyes before he lay down. He looked at me like he wanted to tell me something very important. Something heavy was weighing on his soul, but he stopped himself and stayed silent. I have regretted that moment for 53 years. I wish I had forced him to speak. Tears rolled down her aged cheeks as she continued, "I know many people still blame me. They think I killed him, but I swear, it was not my fault. It was not anyone's fault. It was destiny. Bruce was carrying too much, the unbearable pressure of fame, the death threats from the triads, and his own dangerous habits that were slowly destroying his body. The extreme training, the pills, the lack of rest, they all pushed him to the edge. She paused, took a shaky breath, and looked straight into the camera with quiet strength. I am 78 years old now. I no longer care what people say about me. I just want the truth to be told before I leave this world. Bruce was not murdered. He was not cursed. He was a brilliant but exhausted man who was consumed by the very fire that made him a legend. For the first time in 53 years, Betty Ting Pei spoke not as the accused, but as a woman who had loved deeply and suffered greatly. The storm that began in 1973 had finally in some way come to an end. But the world is still listening, and her final confession has forced everyone to look again at the tragic, complicated, and very human story behind the death of a legend. After 53 years of silence, Betty Ting Pei has finally spoken. Her words have shattered the official story and revealed the painful truth behind Bruce Lee's tragic death. A story of secret love, deadly pressure, invisible threats, and self-destructive habits that consumed a legend. Now at 78 years old, she no longer fears the world's judgment. She only wants the truth to be known. What do you think? Was Bruce Lee's death simply a tragic accident or something far more complicated? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe Betty's final confession? If you want more untold stories from the world of legends, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel with notifications on. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious.